there a place in today's politics for snarling, thin-skinned and aggressive leaders?
Is there a place in today's politics for snarling, thin-skinned and aggressive leaders? The words used by the UKIP campaign manager, Patrick O'Flynn, about our guest here tonight, Nigel Farage. But I won't start with you, Nigel. Tristram Hunt.
Oh, that's disappointing.
We're seeing some pretty ruckus times with UKIP at the moment, and Nigel will answer for those. From a Labour perspective, we have our own challenges because despite what we're seeing with UKIP, we lost an awful lot of votes in historically Labour communities.
What are you talking about? The question isn't about that. The question's about snarling, thin-skinned, aggressive leaders, unless you pretend to be one of those.
No, but I was trying to sort of expand it beyond
well, don't
snarling.
answer the question. We may come to the Labour Party later.
Okay, fine. I think that historically there are leaders with all sorts of attributes. I think clearly there's space for snarling leaders within modern politics, just not in the Labour Party.
Okay. All right, Nigel Farage.
Well, no, of course there isn't. I mean, snarling, aggressive, angry leaders wouldn't get very far, would they? And I suppose generally my reputation... I don't think I've ever been photographed without a pint of beer, and generally quite a big smile. And I was disappointed that a member of our team said this, but look, general elections, you're under a huge amount of pressure, and particularly it's like a boiler room, a pressure cooker. And I'm sure the others would agree. And we maintain discipline as a party extraordinarily well during this general election compared to the past. The election's over, people are letting off steam, and we've seen one or two people fighting personal wars against each other. But what I would say is this. I think what people are looking for in politics are leaders that are assertive, leaders that are not afraid to tell the truth, even if they know it may not always be popular, leaders that have actually had a job in the real world and got some experience of life, and leaders that are in politics out of conviction and not just for a career. And whatever my faults are, and perhaps they're many, I'm in politics because I believe in what I say and I want this country to change.
You did resign, then 2 days later you came back again as leader. Are you now leader, and are you confident that you will remain leader?
I did resign. I did resign, is the first point to make. And I was, you know, as I said, if I didn't win, I'd resign, and I had to offer that resignation formally to our elected national executive of the party, who just point blank refused to accept it and showed me signatures, online signatures of thousands of members saying I simply shouldn't go and mustn't go. And so I went and sat in a darkened room and thought, what do I do? I would say smoke-filled room, but that's against the law these days, isn't it? And I thought, actually, what amazed me was for the national executive of any political party to be unanimous is in itself pretty remarkable. And I felt, quite frankly, moved by the strength of their appeal. And I said, on the basis of that, I will continue. And particularly as the one thing that I've striven for in 20 years in politics, from a tiny party to what's now quite a big party, I've always pushed for this country to have a referendum on our membership of the European Union, and now would have been, in retrospect, the wrong time to go.
Would you consider clearing the air by standing in a leadership election, say in the autumn before your conference, and allowing others, because clearly there are people who think you shouldn't any longer be leader, we've heard their voices.
Well,
today.
actually...
Would you consider standing in a leadership election just to clear the air?
Actually, I mean, if you look at today, if you look at the leader of our group in the House of Lords, the leader of our MEPs, if you look at, you know, the people like Richard Desmond and Paul Sykes and Alan Bown and Aaron Banks, the people that have bankrolled the party.
And Stuart Wheeler.
One person who hasn't, but every other one, every single donor who's given us more than Stuart Wheeler has come out tonight in public support. UKIP Wales, UKIP Scotland, UKIP Northern Ireland. The level of support for me in the party is phenomenal. And frankly, to go through a leadership contest at a time when Mr Cameron says he's renegotiating our relationship with the European Union would be a massive, massive mistake.
The people of England would think of you a lot better if you'd stood by your word and went back for another re-election. But you didn't. You've gone back and you
as I say, the one big change is that we have, by fluke almost, and partly because of the SNP, but we have a majority Conservative government. And now Mr Cameron has to deliver something in that referendum promise that he only made because of the rise of the support of UKIP. My guess is he's going to call that referendum early. My guess is that referendum will be in May next year, and for UKIP to spend 3 months on a leadership campaign would have been a huge mistake.
Right. I'll come to other members of the audience in a moment. Sorry, Jeremy Hunt.
Well, I'm not that surprised to hear any politician described as thin-skinned, because actually, and this might come as a huge surprise to the British people, but all politicians are actually human underneath. We're pretty good at disguising it sometimes, I know, Nigel, but I think actually everyone has that human side.
Aggressive and snarling?
Snarling, I think, is perhaps something that's a subset of politicians, let's put it that way. But I think the...
You recognise it as a description of the leader of UKIP?
He's always been a total charmer when I've seen him, and I didn't think I was going to come onto this show and stick up for Nigel Farage, but there you are. That's my job in the cabinet, go on. But what I would say is that I think that those personal attacks always backfire. And actually, they are the worst thing in British politics. They actually remind people what they dislike most about politicians. And I think normally when they happen, they reflect far worse on the person who made the attack than the person who's actually being attacked. And I think that there's a post-election period. It's a time of challenge for parties that didn't win. But people should remember that point.
All right. The woman in the third row.
Well, I have to act by an elected national executive who were there as the representatives of 47,000 members of our party, and they were unanimous in their view. But it wasn't just that; it was them bringing in letters of support and showing that look, the Labour Party, and Lib Dems have got to go through a leadership contest. Yeah. They said, Nigel, you would be putting this party through unnecessary grief. You've done a great job. You've fought a great campaign. A referendum's on the agenda. Get on with it.
Okay. Zanny Minton.
This European referendum, it's on the agenda. It's being debated. I'll be in Strasbourg next week doing battle with the European Commission.
But won't you be in a stronger position if you don't have people saying that you're going back on your word?
If I'm right, and this referendum, and I can't see Cameron wanting to see the whole 5 years of his government dominated by this. We've got English, Welsh and Scottish elections in May next year. That's when the referendum's going to be. We can't afford as a party that wants Britain to be free to waste 3 or 4 months of our time having a leadership contest where, frankly, we know the result already.
We know the result already because it's a one-man band.
Because at the moment, it's far from a one-man band, but at the moment, I have an astonishing level of support within the party.
Brian May.
I don't have a problem with you changing your mind about resigning. I think that happens a lot. People resign, and it's the gentlemanly thing to do in a sense. And if people don't want to reject that, who believe in you, I think that's very valid. Yeah, I didn't think I would be supporting Nigel Farage in this programme either, but I support that. What I don't like, in common with Jeremy here, is this kind of insults approach in politics, and I think that's what we need to get rid of. And I think it's a real shame that people in your party have adopted that attitude. Snarling, aggressive, whatever. Let's look at the positive side. This kind of negative campaigning is really damaging British politics, I believe, and that's part of the reason that people really don't believe in politicians anymore. So I'm with you, really.
That's probably
okay. I get the woman at the back. Yes.
I'm just wondering what will be the point of UKIP now that we are going to have a referendum.
Sorry, I wanted to go to the woman behind you, actually, if I can.
But it's a very good question, and they asked the same thing about the SNP, who lost a referendum, and then look what happened to them. So you never know in politics.
Okay, over there, look. On the...
Back to Nigel Farage's point about your support within the party, I don't think it matters whether or not you have support within the party. The people of South Thanet don't support you anymore. You're no longer MP, and I don't think that means you should be the leader of the party anymore, personally.
Actually, can I just correct you? I've never been an MP, I've been an MEP, and it is a quite extraordinary thing that we now have an electoral system in Britain where UKIP get more votes than the Liberal Democrats and the SNP combined. In fact, Chuck implied we're about the same as half the panel I stood on the leaders' debates with, and we've only got one member of Parliament. And at no point in the democratic history of this country have so many electors been represented by so few representatives. Yeah. And we do need genuine electoral reform in this country. I would never have believed, David, that we could get 4 million votes, that we could be the third biggest party by a country
But your words were, without a Westminster seat, how you had to be in the House of Commons, and you ain't.
And again, I said to the gentleman there how politics has changed. Who would have thought Nicola Sturgeon would emerge such a winner not even standing for the British Parliament. So, you know, the political scenery
she never said she'd have to stand down. She didn't run for city.
Politics is changing, and I hope it changes a lot more too.
Politics has become more divided. Politics has become more dynamic. I do think we're going to have to look at the electoral system again. The entirety of the Parliament, this is what... It's depressing that we lost, but what is exciting about this Parliament is that the future of the United Kingdom is going to have to be discussed, our federal future, potentially.
I may not have won the seat in South Thanet, but we've taken Thanet District Council. We have a working majority of 10. It is the first UKIP-controlled authority in this country, and watch how they get on.
Okay.
Who is the best person to make Labour electable again?
Right. I'm not going to come to you, Tristram Hunt, first. We'll go to Nigel Farage. Who do you think is the best person?
I think one of the remarkable things...
Let's talk about Labour's...
I think one of the remarkable things about this general election, and a story that has not yet been fully told, is that the metropolitan elite and media have misunderstood what UKIP's about over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. As we've grown, there was always the impression that all UKIP voters were former Conservatives and angry and elderly, and perhaps in the early days we had a few of those. But actually in this election what we saw were many of our older voters actually leave us for this election and vote Conservative because of their fear of the SNP. And the reason we got 4 million votes is we supplemented that with younger voters. A lot of people...
Sorry, the question's about...
Hang on. A lot of people... a long route round. A lot of people who'd never voted before, and we cost the Labour Party 20 to 30 seats because they had a leader that does not connect in the Midlands and the North, and a Labour Party that doesn't connect with working-class communities in this country. And if Labour make the mistake of choosing somebody else again from the metropolitan elite, they will have got it wrong. I thought, actually, Dan Jarvis, who's the guy that's ruled himself out, might have been the kind of Labour MP that would connect. From the list of runners and riders I've seen so far, none of them will connect, and I think Labour faces a massive, massive crisis for its soul.
Okay.
I personally would like to see the Labour Party become what it used to be in the old days of an Aaron Bevan and whatever. I would like to see it become the party of the working man again. And to me, that's disagreeing with you completely, you know, but I think that the working people of this country feel betrayed. And I was actually shocked that Cameron could get away, you know, in the midst of this enormous spin which was behind him, to say that the Conservative Party is the party of the working man, whereas in fact it's the party of the rich man, you know, and probably the undeserved rich.
I have to say, I mean, I wish Tristan well in your campaign. If you want to talk about internationalism to working-class Labour voters, they want to talk about depressed wages, the fact their kids can't get houses, they can't get school places. They're the conversations that working-class communities want, and I don't see a single Labour leadership contender, even possibly including yourself, that is even connecting or understanding with what these people say.
I think you should...
Well, I'm a Conservative Cabinet Minister, so I think I'm the last person that Tristram is actually going to listen to for any advice, but I would just gently say I think you need to find a better slogan than progressive, internationalist, social democratic future, because I think that does sound quite Westminster Village.
To get back to the point on housing, which is acting as a real stifler for social mobility, will all of the political parties, and Zani's there from The Economist also, just comment on the fact that the housing crisis is caused by the inability to build on the green belt, which is essentially because of the inability to confront...
But you think that any party that said they'd build on the green belt would win votes?
No, but I think it would improve the housing shortage.
No, we don't
and
need
that would
to do
improve
that.
social mobility and the
Zan,
aspirations.
you take this up.
Fully answer The Economist. Surely, what nobody dares talk about here is demand. And demand is a rapidly
People
rising...
are talking about demand the whole time.
But a rapidly rising population has put massive pressure on housing in this country.
So you build more houses.
And not to admit that, and I found this in the leaders' debates, they simply wouldn't admit it. We have got hundreds of thousands of empty properties in this country, some owned by government, and lots of brownfield sites that we could build on, and we could provide those houses.
It sounds as if you didn't want to really talk about it, but just touching on the point of the green belt, the whole point of aspiration is that you want to live near the countryside and the city. If you get rid of the green belt, then you lose most of what people want to live in the suburbs for.
What concessions should the Prime Minister try and get for Britain from other EU member countries prior to the referendum?
David Cameron's already been discussed with the European Union. A lot of the policies he wants to discuss are actually not up for discussion. So I don't know where we're actually going to go with this.
Yes, the German government saying they want treaty change one day, but it won't happen tomorrow.
I would like to know if you think David Cameron wants us to come out of Europe or not. I would love to know.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer it. I don't think David Cameron does want to leave the EU, but he wants to know that he can get the right deal before he recommends to the British people that we stay in.
I mean, the one thing for certain is we will not change the European Union itself. They're not interested. They want a European army. They're pushing ahead towards establishing effectively a United States of Europe. The question, what concessions is David Cameron going to get, or could he get, that might change our minds? There will be no treaty change. You know, Germany and the European Commission would rather Britain left than gave Britain a treaty change, because as soon as we got a treaty change, the whole of Scandinavia would want it. France would want it. You know, you would begin to unpick the whole structure. If Cameron was able to get treaty change, and we did not have to have free movement of people, we were able to control our borders, if he was able to get back the supremacy of law, such that our Parliament and our Supreme Court would be the ultimate arbiters of British law, not courts in Luxembourg or in Strasbourg, if he came back with that, he'd win the referendum comfortably. But those concessions are not on the table. And what we should be saying is this: what is it we want from our relationship with the European Union? And far from being negative, I want a positive relationship with Europe. I want one based on free trade, which my parents' generation were conned into voting for after a supposed renegotiation. I want friendship, reciprocity. Let's be good next-door neighbours, but let's govern ourselves and let's start thinking a bit more about the rest of the world and not be so obsessed with the markets in Europe. Okay.
For Nigel to say we need to be internationalists and think beyond Europe,
yes.
The way you get into China and India and America is through Europe.
No, it is not.
It is a big trading bloc. And to turn our back on that is the little England rhetoric which will bring us towards poverty in the long run. So Europe is our way into and through the world, and we need to reform Europe.
I'm sorry, we cannot have this. Now, when this referendum comes...
We can have this.
When this referendum comes, the entire political class will tell you that we're better off inside the EU because it gives us more clout on the world stage. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. As the world's 6th largest trading nation, we are forbidden from making our own trade deals with any other part of the world. Little countries like Switzerland have got more free trade agreements globally than we've got as EU members. And Iceland, with 250,000 people, has managed to sign its own trade deal with China. We could do a damn sight better job having a trade relationship with the EU, and let's start embracing the Commonwealth and the emerging markets of the world.
All right, thank you. Brian, to put the question that was put to Ed Miliband, did you overspend?
Yes, we overspent because we did not...
Vote for a creeping federalism. I voted for a common market, and neither did I vote, and I don't think the country was ever asked whether they wanted unlimited immigration into this country.
The United Kingdom is in a permanent minority within the EU. There are these great power blocks and voting blocks that we are not part of. What David Cameron has said, rather like a member of a relationship that's in trouble, is unless there are changes, I want to leave now. And if the other party comes back and says there aren't going to be any changes, then we've got to leave. There is no way we can stay after that, is there?
Well, but the trouble is that Mr Cameron himself has made it perfectly clear, even before he enters those negotiations, that whatever the outcome, he's going to vote for us to stay in. And that, you know, you need a great big stick in
Nigel,
Europe.
that doesn't
you need
matter.
a great big stick
Nigel,
to get any concessions.
that doesn't matter, because in the end...
it does matter,
no, it doesn't, because in the end it's letting the British people... Well, hang on.
If we get a fixed referendum,
UKIP because you wanted a referendum.
A fair referendum.
And we're going to have a fair referendum. We're going to have a fair...
Are we?
Well, now you're starting to complain when you've got exactly what you wanted, which is a referendum.
No, hang on. Brian talked about money.
That is the point.
Brian talked about money earlier.
Whether or not... No, let me just finish, because you've spoken a lot. David Cameron is going to get a new deal.
No, it's not.
And he's going to get a new deal. But even if you don't agree with it, even if Tristram doesn't agree with it, in the end, it's the British people who will decide if they like that deal or not. We will have a debate. We haven't had that since 1974.
Right.
And I think he deserves credit for giving the British people a say.
Both sides must have the same amount of money, because I was involved in Ireland, where the Irish rejected the Lisbon Treaty. They were told they got it wrong, made to vote again, and the European Commission it's Brian's point about money, came in with EU money and massively overspent the No campaign. We need a guarantee from the Prime Minister that will not be allowed to happen and we get a proper...
I'm sorry. Let's listen to the British people, but let's inform them fairly.
Of course, if that's what you have in the referendum. Is it fair that UKIP got the third highest vote share, yet only got 1 seat?
Is it fair?
Can I answer?
Zanny.
I think it shows the problems with first-past-the-post voting. I think, no, in some ways it's not fair.
In some ways? There's no way it's whether or not you agree with Farage. There's no way that's fair. Come on, is there?
But
is that democracy? We need a proper commission established, a selection of people who will, in an unbiased way, examine all the possible voting systems and come up with a recommendation. And I think David Cameron at least owes us that. I mean, we've had a dismissal from a couple of members of the Conservative Party, and I think that's a disgrace. I mean, how can it be democratic to just blindly support the system which supports you? There has never been a major party in power who would take apart the first-past-the-post system because it won't benefit them. That's not democracy.
Everybody who's in the House of Commons is there because of first-past-the-post.
Yeah, so why would they change it?
And what's your answer to that? They won't.
I think we need... Well, my dream was that we would have a parliament that was more evenly distributed, and therefore we would get a parliament acting like it was meant to, where things would be debated on an honest basis, and on the basis of the decision they came to, the law would be adjusted in that way.
Just remind the viewers of the figures. UKIP has 1 MP for 3,881,099 votes. The Tories have 1 MP for 34,000 votes.
Yeah, and the question was, is that fair? And the answer is it's not fair.
What do you say to 4 million UKIP voters and 1 million Green voters who have 2 MPs in the House of Commons?
Well, I say that, you know...
What's your offer to them? Apart from vote Conservative?
You know, this is a system which... Well, I think, actually, this is a system where we have a two-party system because that holds the big parties' feet to the fire to be accountable for their promises. And my worry is, if you go... And I'm actually quite surprised that... Because this PR system is what they have in Europe, Nigel, and I didn't think you normally support European things, but...
Isn't that interesting you say that? Because every single government in Germany since 1945 has been a coalition government, and I would argue Germany probably has been rather better run than Britain's been. So the arguments against coalition are absolute, complete nonsense. This is not just unfair, what has happened here, it's an outrage. There are millions of people out there who feel completely disenfranchised by this general election. And we don't need to spend time, Brian, on a commission. All the work was done. When Tony Blair was talking about how to modernise and change Britain, he appointed Roy Jenkins, you know, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, former European Commissioner. So I didn't always agree with him. He did all the work. And the one agreement was that there is a benefit to knowing there is a man or woman that represents Uxbridge. Absolutely. But what he recommended was a second ballot paper, as they have in Germany, where for the last 20% of seats you could express an opinion. And by doing that, nobody anywhere in Britain could say to themselves, my vote is a wasted vote. Because right at the moment, if you're a socialist living in Esher with a monster Tory majority and it's a rainy Thursday evening, where's the incentive to go and vote? So not only are your arguments about coalition wrong, not only is it right to say that this is unfair, but actually by changing this system, we'll get a lot more young people and people of all ages actually engaged and caring about politics. It'll be a positive thing.
There's one thing you...
Very positive thing.
There was one thing that was designed to give redress to small parties, which is the so-called short money.
Yes.
And because of the number of people who voted for UKIP, you're entitled to £650,000, I think. Do you think you should accept that?
Well, I think what we've got to do is we've got to try and find a way of getting those 4 million people involved. Now,
should you accept the money that's there?
Hang on. The Labour Party will take several £1 million a year and there'll be no conversation. We've had an open debate in UKIP over this short money. And you know something? The last thing the public want to see is a political party infighting over public money. And I'm going to recommend we don't take any of it. I'm going to recommend we privately fundraise and set up a structure where we can give those 4 million people a chance to actually get their voices heard.
Can I just... Hold on a second. So you will take none of the money that's on offer
My recommendation, given we've had an argument over this, I do not want UKIP to look like the other parties, grubbing around after public money. My recommendation is going to be we take none of it and we fund it ourselves.
All right.
No, it's true, because with the AV vote in 2011, not enough people were educated on the fact that what the system was and what it could provide. They had their chance, it was voted no, so should electoral reform be considered again?
But
it was an incredible sleight of
hand. AV wasn't a proportional system, it was a preferential system. We couldn't explain it in a sentence to people in the referendum. Why Nick Clegg, after 40 years of the Lib Dems campaigning for PR, sold out for AV, I will simply never, ever know.
Right, my thanks to our panel, to all of you who came to Uxbridge to take part.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.